Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update.
Hello and welcome to the Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading. Today we will be analyzing the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated December 23rd, 2020. The topics to be discussed today are reflected on your screen and the timestamping for the same has been provided in the description box below. So let's start. Now we will begin our today's discussion based on this article given on page number 14 titled Center to Set Up Development Finance Entity in 3 to 4 months. Well, the context of the news is that in the last union budget, that is the budget of 2020-21, the finance minister had suggested that we will set up what is known as a development finance institution or a DFI, also known as development banks, in order to promote infrastructure funding in India. Now, the setting up of DFI, that is the Development Finance Institution, will provide financing even for the National Infrastructure Pipeline, which proposes to invest almost 111 lakh crores in the economic and social infrastructure in our country over the period of next 5 years. Now, what are exactly development banks? Well, as I just stated, development banks are specialized kind of financial institutions whose main objective is to promote socio-economic development in the country. Now, these banks provide long-term credit, that too at very low or concessional rates, to certain very critical sectors of our economy. For example, agriculture, infrastructure, industries, MSME, etc. Now, most of the advanced economies such as USA, UK, Japan, etc. have all set up development banks in the past, and this setting up of the development banks, that is, has enabled them to attain high growth momentum. In fact, even China has recently set up development banks for agriculture and trade. So, development banks are not exactly a new concept to India. We do have certain development banks. For example, we have NABARD for agriculture. We have Industrial Finance Corporation of India for industrial development. We have SIDBI and Mudra for MSME development. We have Exim Bank for trade, so on and so forth, etc. So, as far as what are development banks, they are specialized financial institutions which want to promote socio-economic development in the country. Now, the most important question which you should be asking is how are these development banks different from other commercial banks? Because already we do have banks in our country, right? We have a vast banking system which does provide loan. Then why do we need specialized bank to do the same thing, that is provide credit? Well, the development banks differ from the commercial banks majorly on 3 criteria. First is the source of the fund. Now, as far as your commercial bank is concerned, the main source of funding for the commercial bank is the depositors' money. So basically, these commercial banks, they take short-term deposit and from those short-term deposit, they give away loans. However, on the other hand, as far as your development bank is concerned, the main source of fund for these development banks will be the financial support which government provides them. Second is in the nature of loan extended by these banks. Now, commercial banks, as I stated, extend usually short-term loans, whereas development banks, as I was saying here, will provide long-term credit because usually these infrastructure project or any project which aims to enhance the socio-economic development, these projects take a lot of time because socio-economic development does not happen over a day or over a year, right? At least, let's say 5 to 10 years is required for any kind of development on the socio-economic front to actually materialize. Hence, the loan given by these development banks has to be long-term. Third difference is in the role which these banks will play. Now, as far as commercial banks are concerned, the role of a commercial bank is confined to just extension of the loan. That is, you go to a commercial bank, you apply for loan and they give you the loan and the work of the commercial bank gets over there. However, development banks again differ here. The development bank's role is much more multidimensional. So they, in addition to, of course, providing loans, they also provide you with various kinds of assistance. For example, they help the companies to identify projects where these companies can invest. They ensure that the companies invest in financially good projects. They even offer managerial assistance for the execution of projects, so on and so forth. Hence, the role which these banks play to their loanee also varies. Now next, let us see what is the kind of assistance, that is the nature of assistance assistance which is provided by these banks. One, I have already told you that these development banks extend long-term loans to companies, that too at very concessional rates. Okay, one, of course, therefore the first way to provide assistance is through loans. Second, if at all a situation is there that where the development banks cannot provide loan, or where the company does not want loan, in that situation these banks can also at times buy the shares of those companies which are involved in, let's say, infrastructure projects or housing projects. So rather than providing direct loan, this bank will buy equity share of the company, which in a way is like giving money to that company, right? Lastly, not just loans or buying shares, these development banks also help companies, or rather ease out the process of these companies to raise money from the market. Now, many a times, if you're aware, a lot of companies, in order to raise money from the market, issue bonds. Okay. And then on these bonds, they promise to pay certain kind of dividend. Now, what happens many a times is that for a lot of companies, if they want that the people should buy their bonds, they have to make it look very attractive, and for that they have to offer high interest rate. But if these companies are offering high interest rate, then of course for these companies also it will become difficult to pay back those interest rate or those money which they borrowed. So in this situation, this development bank also helps with partial credit guarantee on the repayment of the bonds issued by the company. Okay. So if the company which is issuing the bond defaults on its payment, then this development bank provides partial credit guarantee. That is the guarantee that if the company fails on the repayment, then we will give you back some of your money. Now, this kind of guarantee provided by the bank is known as credit enhancement, and this kind of guarantee reduces the risk of this company and enables the companies to borrow money from the market or from the people at lower interest rate. Because when a development bank is giving its guarantee, then these companies can offer those bonds at lower interest of rates, and then even the people will have the assurance that yes, bank is guaranteeing it, so we can invest in this company and it is safe to do so. Hence, in three ways, that is through loans, by buying the shares, and by giving guarantee, partial credit guarantee on repayment of bonds. This is the three ways in which development banks help various companies. Lastly, coming on to how the development banks will help the Indian economy as far as the larger picture is concerned. Well, first is that it will help our market, or it will help our economy to meet its investment needs. Now, you know that the government has set up a very ambitious goal of a $5 trillion economy by 24-25. Now, in this regard, the economic survey also said that if we want to achieve this goal, what India needs to do is that India needs to shift its gears from consumption expenditure to investment. Currently, now if you're aware, almost 60% of the money in our economy comes from consumption expenditure. Now, this is way too high for any economy. So, what we need to do is that we need to move from this consumption expenditure to investment, particularly private investment. So, we need to increase the private investment in our country. Private investment should be the main engine of the growth of Indian economy. But if we need to increase the private investment, what do we need? We need to increase the credit creation in the economy. Because if there is no credit, or if there is no money or loan available, from where will the companies buy and then invest in the economy? Correct? So it is here that these development banks will come in, because they will help in credit creation, they will help to give out loan, and this increase in credit creation then in turn will increase the private sector investment in our economy and shift the gears of our economy towards a ascending path. Secondly, these banks will help to reduce the pressure on the commercial banks. Now, the financial system in India, is not really diversified. That is, currently it is usually the banks in our country which dominate the financial sector, and other entities, let's say the bond market or other kind of markets, are not that strong. Now, what these banks do is that these banks, commercial banks, they rely on short-term deposit, which the people come and deposit in the banks, and from these short-term deposits, they try to give away long-term loans. However, this is not working out, as is very clear by the high NPAs the banks currently have, and this has led to a asset liability mismatch for the banks. However, if we look at other developed economies of the world, we will see that they have a very diversified financial market. So they have banks, they have bond market, and other kind of financial institution also on the stage, which helps to diversify the financial market, increasing the sources of the avenues from where people can borrow money. In this regard, development banks will help to deepen the bond market. I just now explained how through the partial credit guarantee which they will give. This will help to deepen the bond market and will also lead to increase of diversification in India. And if all of this happens, this will ultimately reduce the pressure which currently is there on the commercial banks, because it's the commercial banks only who have to give away loan, who have to retrieve those loans, etc., and so on and so forth. So it will help to reduce the pressure from commercial banks. Last but not the least, this will also help to reduce foreign currency exposure in our country. Now what happens is that some infrastructure and housing companies, they get loan from abroad, that is from overseas market. However, the problem with borrowing money from overseas market is that now foreign currency is involved. So if in the future the value of rupees depreciates, this will put additional burden on the company who borrowed the money, because now they would have to pay more money for the same amount of money that they loaned. So for example, if today let's say the $1 is for 50 rupees, and tomorrow the rupee depreciates and $1 becomes for 70 rupees. Now let's say they borrowed $100. So currently they would have to pay 500, but due to depreciation they would now have to pay 700 rupees from their pocket, thereby increasing the burden. However, if we have development banks on the scene, these development banks will help to raise loans in the domestic market itself, and this will reduce the foreign currency exposure of these companies. So these were the major points as far as development banks is concerned. This topic is important as far as mains is also concerned, so please keep an eye on it. With this, let's take up our next news. Now the next news in which we will be talking about the composite flow test has been taken from page number 4. The news is titled High Court Orders Composite Flow Test in BTC. Well, to quickly tell you the context is that recently the Guwahati High Court ordered that a composite flow test should be conducted in Bodoland Territorial Council in order to ascertain the constitutional validity of the newly formed Executive Council. Now what has happened is that a 3-party alliance has formed the Executive Council of the Bodoland Territorial Council, and due to this the other parties have contended or questioned the constitutional validity of such Executive Council. So in this context, the High Court has ordered that let us test the constitutional machinery on the floor of the Territorial Council, and let's see which party enjoys the majority. So in this context, we'll talking about the composite flow test. Before you can understand what is a composite flow test, it is important to know what is a flow test. Now, a flow test, also known as a confidence motion or a trust vote, is a situation in which a motion is introduced in order to ascertain if the ruling government enjoys the majority in the House or not. Well, to give you the background of the invention of the flow test, well, you all know that under Article 356 of our Indian Constitution, if at all the constitutional machinery in a state breaks down, then in that situation, the president of our country can take control of that state. Now, many a time this president's rule is imposed on the report which is submitted by the governor. Many a times, however, the president himself or herself makes the decision. However, due to Article 356, what started to happen is that the central government time and again took to the reason that the constitutional machinery in the state has broken down, hence we will take control of the state. And in a way, they started to misuse this provision of Article 356. It was in this context that the S.R. Bommai case came to the light. Now, I won't discuss what was held in this case, but the basic idea which this case conveyed was that we need to protect the Federation of India, as well as we need to prevent the misuse of this power of president's rule by the center time and again. Hence, what is best is that rather than the center saying or assuming that the constitutional machinery has broken down, we should test for this constitutional machinery on the floor of the state legislative assembly itself. which basically means that rather than assuming that the present government has lost its confidence or has lost the majority, rather than assuming that, it's better that let us test that on the floor. Let us call the president government to the floor of the state legislative assembly and ask them to prove their majority. Therefore, since the ruling party is proving their majority on the floor of the state legislative assembly itself, it is known as a floor test. So, floor test is nothing. It is a motion which is introduced by the ruling government itself to ascertain or to check that do they still enjoy the confidence, do they still have the majority in the house or not. Hence, in this situation, the governor asks the CM to come and prove his majority. Now, as far as where this floor test is mentioned, well, it is not defined or mentioned in the Constitution of India. However, the idea or the concept that is the basis of the floor test flows from Article 75. Article 75, as you all know, speaks about collective responsibility. That is, the Council of Ministers collectively will be responsible to the Legislative Assembly, State Legislative Assembly. Hence, it is very important that the Council of Ministers at all times should enjoy the majority of the State Legislative Assembly. And if they do not enjoy this majority, they cannot hold the office. Hence, to uphold the principle of collective responsibility, we require the floor test, the confidence motion, or the trust motion. Now, the floor test or the confidence motion is antithesis of the no confidence motion, because no confidence motion is not introduced by the ruling government. It is introduced by any other member of the house. However, the floor test or the confidence motion is introduced by the ruling government. Now that you have understood what is a floor test, let us talk about what is a composite floor test. Well, composite floor test has the same idea that you want to check the majority on the floor of the house. The only difference being here is that in a composite floor test, there is not one person or there is not one party who is enjoying the majority. So let's say a situation arises where more than one person is taking claim to form the government. That is, they are saying that, we have the numbers, we have the majority and we should form the government. However, the election results clearly show us that the majority of any one party or those one people who are contesting to form the government, that majority is not clear. In that situation, the governor of that state will call for a special session in order to check which party or which person enjoys the majority. So how is a composite floor test different from a floor test? Is that in the floor test you already have a ruling government, you already have a CM, there is already a government which is formed and that government needs to prove its majority. However, in the composite floor test, there is no clear-cut majority which any single party or any one single person is enjoying, and there is no clarity as to who will form the government. So if a lot of people are saying that no, we can form the government, then the governor decides that rather than indulging in all these kinds of bickering, it's better that we call them on the floor of the house in a special session and then ask them to prove their numbers, ask them to prove their majority. Now, in a composite floor test, it is possible that certain legislators can be absent, or even if they are present, they can abstain from voting. It's absolutely fine. A person or a legislator is allowed to abstain from voting, and if at all they do abstain from voting or are not present, then in that case, the legislators who have voted, based on their votes only, we will count whoever enjoys the majority. Now, as far as how the vote can happen, this vote can happen either through a voice vote, that is orally, or it can happen through a division vote. Now, division vote can happen either through certain electronic gadgets or certain kind of machines, or even through a secret ballot as and what is available. So this is the difference between composite floor test and a floor test. This can be important as far as your prelims are concerned. With this, let's take up our next news. This next news appears on page number 1, titled Fireflies to Shine Light for the Great Indian Bustard. Now, in this article, we will be talking about the Great Indian Bustard from the prelims perspective. Now, the context of the news is that one of the threats to the Great Indian Bustards, which is one of the critically endangered birds in India, is their electrocution with power transmission lines. Now, seeking to redress this problem, the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, along with the Wildlife Conservation Society, they have come up with a unique idea initiative where they will install flaps on the overhead power lines so that the Great Indian Bustards can spot these flaps or can spot these power lines at night from a distance in order to avoid collision. Now, coming on to information and facts about the Great Indian Bustard, it is India's one of the heaviest flying birds and it is endemic to the Indian subcontinent. Now, please remember it is Indian subcontinent and not India, so it is found in the neighboring region of India as well. In India, it is found in states of Rajasthan predominantly, also in states of Gujarat, certain districts of Maharashtra, Karnataka, and Andhra Pradesh. As far as designated protected areas of the Great Indian Bustard is concerned, it is found at the Desert National Park in Rajasthan, Rolapadu Wildlife Sanctuary in Andhra Pradesh, and Karera Wildlife Sanctuary in MP. It is also included in Appendix 1 of the sites. Its IUCN status is critically endangered. It is included in Schedule 1 of our Wildlife Protection Act of 2002. Furthermore, the state of Rajasthan runs a project known as Project Great Indian Bustard, in which they identify and try to seal off the breeding grounds of the Great Indian Bustards in order to increase their population. Furthermore, recently, somewhere in April and May as well, the central government released almost 33 crores for a project titled Habitat Improvement and Conservation Breeding of Great Indian Bustard and Integrated Approach, and this funds was released from the Campa funds. Now, as far as threats is concerned, as I stated, electrocution with high power transmission line is one of the major reasons. Then irrigation, change in their habitat is another reason. Mining, wind turbines, solar farms is again a reason for the electrocution, as well as plantation of exotic shrub and tree species in deserts, which has led to a change in their environment, is also another reason. Now here on the left I have given a question which appeared in the 2020 prelims paper this year. The question was with respect to Desert National Park. It read, it is spread over 2 districts. There is no human habitation inside the park and it is one of the natural habitats of the Great Indian Bustard. So if this question were to appear in front of you, you know the third statement is correct. Okay, so you can remove option A by elimination. Now coming on to the other two. It is spread over 2 districts. Well, we don't know because it is a very state specific fact, right? So let us hold this option. Coming to the second statement, there is no human habitation inside this park. Well, logically, do you think is it ever possible that no human beings or there can be absolutely no human habitation inside a national park? Of course not. This is too extreme a statement. Hence, therefore it is incorrect. So in the exam, even if you're not sure about the statement, sometimes words like no, any, at all, these are very extreme words and most of the time such statements are incorrect. So the moment we eliminate second, all options go for a toss. Only thing left is 1 and 3 only, which was the correct answer as well. With this, let's take up our next news. Now this next news appears on page number 10, titled Health Data Shows India Does Not Need a Two-Child Policy. Well, recently the data of the National Family Health Survey 5 was done by the International Non-Profit Population Council of India. And as per the results of the data analysis, it has been found out that there has been an increase in the usage of modern contraceptives both in the rural and urban areas in India. And due to this increase in the use of modern contraceptives, there has been a decline in the average number of children born by a woman in our country. Now this is a good news because whilst National Health Survey 3 and 4 were being conducted somewhere between 2004 to 2016, there was a decline in the use of modern methods of contraception. Now this evidence by the PCI study then points out to the fact that India's population is actually stabilizing and the earlier fears which we had over population explosion are all misguided and unfounded, and therefore we do not require a two-child policy like China. Furthermore, the data also shows us that the total fertility rate has decreased across 14 of the 17 states of whose data they analyzed and is now at 2.1 children per woman or even less in some states. Now this also implies that a lot of states in India have attained the replacement level fertility also. Replacement level fertility is 2.1. Now though this information is not important, however, you can keep this in mind or probably use it if you're writing let's say an essay or a mains question on population control measures. Probably you can use this point here if your word limit allows. With this, let's take up our next news. Now, this next news appears on page number 10 and it is with respect to leopards, and it says that Western Ghats has a good population of leopards. Now, as far as leopard in India is concerned, the Indian leopard is one of the subspecies, one of the 9 subspecies of the leopard, and it is distributed all across the Indian subcontinent. Now, the leopard is one of the big cats occurring in India, including the Asiatic lion, Bengal tiger, snow leopard, and clouded leopard. The IUCN status of leopard is vulnerable, and it has become so because their populations have declined following habitat loss and fragmentation as well as poaching. Now in 2014, India had almost 8,000 leopards, and now the population has increased to almost 13,000. Hence, a more than 60% increase in population has been recorded. Out of this, the state of Madhya Pradesh, followed by Karnataka and Maharashtra, have recorded the highest leopard estimates. Now, an important fact you need to remember here is that no separate survey or census is conducted for leopard. The quadrennial tiger survey, which is conducted after every 4 years, also estimates the population of other animals, including leopards, by relying on the camera trap images. So, this was all about this article. Let's go on to our next news. Now, on page number 7, an article has appeared titled 5 Years Since Paris, An Opportunity to Build Back Together. Now, as much as the title of this article is very attractive, there isn't much in the context as far as relevancy of the exam is concerned. Now, this article has been written by the ambassador of the European Union. It is very centric to the EU, the various measures taken by EU, and a few points, probably 1 or 2, of EU and India's partnership as far as climate change is concerned. And there also just mentions about the International Solar Alliance. So this is not a very relevant article as far as your exam is concerned. The only thing, it is more like a build-up to COP26, which will be happening somewhere around in November 2021 in Glasgow. So nothing much is here. However, we have still attached a few points from this article in your PDF. If you wish, you can take a look at it, but it's not important.